Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, as the fallout from the Nikhil Gupta case continues, more Sikh organisations are now taking advantage of the situation to shake the US administration into waking up to the threat of India. But at the same time, where is the next man up the chain, the next link to the Indian government, Vikash Yadav? Well, we'll turn our attention today on his story. In the United Kingdom, as a Sikh MP reminds us of the terrible hate crime rape of a Sikh girl recently, a firestorm erupts over our Sikh MPs' hypocrisy over the grooming gang scandal. Why did so many of our Sikh MPs vote against an inquiry? Just what are they protecting? And in happy news, the largest Gurdwara in West Africa opens. Now we'll take a look at a particularly entrepreneurial Sikh who took on a 7-day Rolls Royce Turban challenge. 7 days, 7 different Rolls Royces that he does own, wearing 7 different matching turbans. All, of course, to raise money for charity. All this and more on today's show. And, of course, at the end of the show, we'll take a look at loads of great comments. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, let's get underway. And, yes, the Nikhil Gupta case trundles on, of course. Now it's all Sikh organisations around, particularly the United States, but not just limited to the United States. The diaspora, of course, taking a huge interest in this situation. And of course, all the organisations in the United States are jumping on this, thinking, right, this is a big moment of momentum. This is a big opportunity for us just to remind the US administration, Donald Trump's presidency, that the buck does not just stop at Nikhil Gupta. He is but a patsy. He is but a low-level hitman hired or trying to hire a hitman on behalf of somebody or something else. And of course, we all know the implications of that. So all the organisations are now thinking, right, we need to push this momentum. This is but a first step, is the key message. And the Sikh caucus, amongst many other organisations, have actually written to the Attorney General of the United States, that's Pam Bondi. We've got a letter here, which I'll go through in a second. This is signed by the acting president of the American Gurdwara Parbanat Committee, the AGPC, jointly signed by Sikh Coordination Committee of the East Coast and the coordinator of the American Sikh Caucus Committee. So some pretty powerful organisations represented there. It's a letter written to Pam Bondi, but it's also copied into Marco Rubio. He is, of course, the US Secretary of State. Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, to Tulsi Gabbard, a lady we've talked about in the past. She, of course, is the Director of National Intelligence, to the CIA Director and to the FBI Director, Kash Patel. So this letter, very simple, very effective. It's just sending out. It's not so much even what's specifically the details in the letter. It's just, I think it's just the letter is symbolic. It is a symbolic letter to the US administration via Pam Bondi to say, look, we care, we know what's happened, but this is but a first step. So what it does say, addressed to Pam Bondi, but also actually Todd Blanche, he's the Deputy Attorney General as well. And we write on behalf of all the Gurdwaras across the United States, of which there are a lot. In other words, this does essentially speak on behalf of the Panth. And it asks that your team, the US legal team who prevented an American activist assassination on American soil, firstly to recognise, well done for doing that, but also to urge that this work must continue to bring Vikash Yadav and all co-conspirators to justice. And it says, under President Trump, murder for hire plots and intimidation of US citizens by foreign governments will come to an end. A little bit of flattery thrown in there. We all know Donald Trump, but obviously ego-driven, loves a bit of flattery. So nicely put, I'd say. Gupta's guilty plea is a necessary first step, not a finish line. Absolutely. And this is the key message. This is just the first step in bringing the bigger fish to justice. So it gives a little bit of the background, obviously, that we know about. Thank you. And again, this is very much, it's a very diplomatically written letter. It's saying, look, we really appreciate the efforts that you've done so far. Thank you. But again, this is just the first step. Your swift work made the public safer, reaffirmed a core American principle. The law protects people in this country regardless of who threatens them. That, again, is it's very deliberately put in this letter. It's just reminding Pam Bondi and the US state, look, you have a duty to protect us. We thank you for it, but don't forget you have a duty because it is a core American principle. In other words, you can't avoid it, you've got to protect us. You have saved lives, stopping the potential killing of Gurpratap Singh Pannu was obviously speaks for itself. And it sends a clear message: the US will defend its people. Again, just reinforcing this message: you have a duty as a US government to protect us. But, and this is where it gets more significant, more needs to be done. Gupta's guilty plea is a necessary first step, not a finish line. The inquiry must continue until Yadav and every co-conspirator faces justice in an American court. So it is asking for three, what it calls concrete steps. Firstly, pursue full accountability up the chain. Continue the investigation and charging decisions beyond Mr. Gupta to include Mr. Yadav and any other coordinators, funders, intermediaries, and or others tied to this plot. Interesting, though, the language is very contained here. It just says co-coordinators, intermediaries, whatever. It hasn't actually specifically made the accusations that we and most people in the diaspora sort of say. We know who's really behind this. But anyway, of course, this is a very official, very diplomatic letter to the US administration. They can't just throw out accusations like we do, obviously. They have a bit more of a responsible position to hold on this. But so they're doing it in exactly the right way. But they're saying, use every lawful tool to secure Yadav's appearance in a US court. Prioritise arrest, extradition, or other lawful means to bring Yadav before an American judge, and keep Congress appropriately briefed on obstacles that require policy support. That's an interesting point. Basically, it is saying, yes, you must pursue the deportation of Yadav, who presumably is still in India, and I'll talk about Yadav in a moment. So you must bring about every possible lawful means to get Yadav to the United States to face justice, but importantly, keep Congress, and therefore the public, briefed on any problems, any obstacles that are thrown up that require policy support. Firstly, in other words, if India are throwing up deliberate obstacles to try and prevent Yadav being deported, we need to know about this because it's important knowledge for obvious reasons. And secondly, how can we help? If it requires policy support, we can mobilise the vast diaspora and its supporters to help the politicians, you guys, push this over the line. And then finally, protect communities from follow-on threats. We're thankful for your duty to warn alerts. Please expand guidance and outreach to at-risk communities and local law enforcement about foreign-directed intimidation, including steps to report threats and preserve evidence for prosecution. And again, immediately things like SB 509 that Governor Newsom rejected in California, these legal instruments that are being promoted and sponsored by the diaspora and really pushed that, sadly, those who are being influenced by Hindutva forces are trying to prevent coming into law. So again, it's saying, look, you've got to please basically join our side in helping us and helping the nation protect our Sikh community. And finally it sets up to say, we close where we began. Gupta's guilty plea is a necessary first step, not a finish line. This is the consistent message, the important message. This is just the first step in a long line of the pursuit of justice. The inquiry must continue until Yadav and every co-conspirator faces justice in American court. We stand ready to support lawful efforts that keep all Americans safe on American soil. So again, you can see it's a pretty powerful letter. As I say, it's signed by the representatives of a very large part of the Sikh diaspora in the United States. Now, also, amongst this and in the background, likewise, there have been countless other statements made by lots of organisations right across North America. And the Sikh Federation of America has also issued a strong rebuke of Indian state operations on foreign soil. And the organisation characterised the plea as what they called a grave and unprecedented moment for the freedom of expression, international law, and the Sikh struggle for an independent homeland, Khalistan. So these guys are bringing in, they're bringing in the whole concept of Khalistan, which is good actually, because it is raising the visibility of the movement again in the public eye, in the public domain. So again, the piggybacking on this assassination attempt and the guilty plea by Nikhil Gupta to say, look, this is all about Khalistan. This is why Gupta Singh Pannoon was targeted, because he was trying to push a simple democratic right, the democratic concept of Khalistan. So therefore, again, it's a really important effort to use this to piggyback the publicity around the assassination attempt by India, because what it is all about? It is all about trying to stop Khalistan happening. The Indian government are terrified of Khalistan and this growing momentum, this growing movement that is essentially going to deliver Khalistan in the foreseeable future. And so the Sikh Federation of America emphasised that the plot isn't an anomaly, but it is evidence of what they call a systematic blueprint of state-directed transnational oppression. So, unlike the Sikh caucus letter, which obviously had to couch its language in much more diplomatic language, it couldn't make sort of bigger accusations. In other words, it didn't want to make it too controversial. But the Sikh Federation of America have not held back. They said, no, absolutely. We know what this is. It is, as they say, it's a state-directed blueprint of transnational oppression. In other words, it's the Indian state that is running out of accountability and flying in the face of international law. And they say the global dimensions of this case are noteworthy. This coordination across borders reflects the blueprint of state-directed transnational oppression, which raises profound concerns about respect for the rule of law and universal human rights in countries like the US and Canada. And they argued that communications shared by Indian agents, which actually included video footage, let's not forget, of Nijar's body just after he'd been murdered, that was shared with Nikhil Gupta, who actually showed it to the DA agent who he tried to hire to assassinate Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. It indicates a larger coordinated campaign against Sikh dissidents right across the diaspora. And of course, that will include Avtar Singh Kandar, amongst many others. So the Sikh Federation obviously acknowledged Gupta's guilty plea. But they also said, look, the legal process must not stop here. It mustn't stop at what they call the operational level. And they said, look, the meaningful justice cannot end with an intermediary. In other words, this is just an intermediate. This is just somebody who's pretty low down the food chain. In other words, the orders must have come from higher up. This is what they call the operation level. This is the operation of the assassination attempt. But somebody must have asked for it. Somebody must have instructed the operations team, right, here is your target, go take him out. So who was that person? And who, likewise, was that person reporting up to? Who must have been aware of this, etc.? And as they said in their statement, without transparency regarding command responsibility and consequences for those who directed and supervised the operation, justice remains elusive. So again, they've actually gone this one step further to say, look, we do need again, in less diplomatic, well, I would say, actually, argue it is diplomatic language, but they are opening up the accusation, saying, look, there is clearly a command structure here that must, almost by definition, go all the way up through RAW, all the way up to the RAW's head, the National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, who in turn cannot have signed off on this operation without oversight, or at least a nod from Narendra Modi, certainly awareness of the plot on behalf of the Indian president. Sorry, Prime Minister, beg your pardon. So, and they continue to say, if transnational targeting minorities on American soil is met with limited consequences, the precedent set will be dangerous, not only for Sikhs, but for vulnerable communities anywhere. And again, this is a point that actually I don't think has been raised enough by all these organisations. But the Sikh Federation of America have raised this, saying, look, if you don't pursue this all the way, if you don't pull this thread all the way up to how it unravels all the way to the top, it is basically sending a message to those who are responsible for this at the top of that food chain, you can get away with it. Now, we've obviously raised this point on a regular basis. If you don't pursue this, if you just bury it like Mark Carney has, like Starmer has here in the UK, if you hide it, you're sending the message, it's okay. You can come and kill our citizens on our sovereign soil. You can break international law. You can come into our countries and kill our citizens, and we won't do anything about it. That's the message that is being sent out if you don't pursue justice all the way up that food chain of command. So, again, and their statement goes into great length, and I won't go into too much detail about it. But essentially, so you can sort of compare and contrast those two statements. Firstly, that one from the Sikh Caucus and the Gurdwara Committee of America, and that's that one there. And then, of course, the statement from Sikh American Foundation in the US as well. So, two slightly different approaches, but the message is united and it is very clear. This is a first step in the pursuit of justice. In other words, you guys must not stop here. Don't brush your hands and say, thanks, job well done. Right, let's go do something else. No, this is literally just that first stepping stone that will probably lead much, much higher up that command structure in India. So let's move on to really, I suppose, the next ultimate, I suppose, logical step. Well, first of all, I mean, how have India reacted to this? Because, of course, India has remained pretty silent in recent months about this. They launched their own investigation at the time and then said that we've kicked Yadav out of the government. It's nothing to do with us anymore. Wasn't us, Gov, as we say in England. As actually Bloomberg reported, I think this was yesterday, Indian officials reiterated their position that New Delhi was not involved in the alleged plot to kill a US citizen and vocal critic of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New York in 2023. Gupta, who pled guilty last week in a New York court for his role, was a private individual without any links to the government, officials in New Delhi said. I mean, I'm not surprised. I would be astonished. I mean, Narendra Modi isn't going to stand up and say, yeah, it was us. We tried to kill Gurdwara Singh Panoon. There's no chance. It'll be a blue moon before the Indian government admits, obviously, guilt over this plot. It's really it is beholden on the US law enforcement to come up with the evidence and hopefully provide that evidence into the public domain to prove that the Indian state was behind this. As I said, and I keep saying, it is unlikely this will happen. I think that pursuit of justice will go up to a certain level, hopefully to include Vikash Yadav, but when it comes to people like Ajit Doval and Narendra Modi, that will not enter the public domain, even if they find proof, because it will create too much of a diplomatic storm in a complex situation where the US is trying to keep India on side against, obviously, a growing threat of China. So I suspect if and when they do create or find the evidence, create is the wrong word, if they uncover the evidence that links the very highest levels of the Indian government, that includes obviously the NSA, Ajit Doval and Narendra Modi himself, if they uncover that evidence, they will keep it secret and they will approach the the Indian government and they will say, right, we've got the evidence, now we are going to make this public unless you do ... So they will basically use it as leverage behind the scenes in those closed doors discussions that will be held at a very, very high level. And they will basically use it as leverage to persuade India to align more closely with the West or whatever target or interest that they would like to achieve out of this. So that is my belief in this situation. So unfortunately, sadly, in the public domain, we will not find out the truth. I mean, we all know it, but we won't actually be witness to the evidence if indeed they do uncover it. So the big question really is, and this does naturally lead on to the next stepping stone in this pursuit of justice, where is Vikash Yadav? Vikash Yadav has been named, obviously, all the way through the Nikhil Gupta case. And of course the headlines have been dominated by Nikhil Gupta's unexpected, I have to say rather unexpected guilty plea in his New York federal court. But there is, of course, this much bigger fish still swimming away there in the shadows. This is the man allegedly pulling Nikhil Gupta's strings, Vikash Yadav. Now, he's always been referred to he was originally referred to, when we first came across this story, he was originally referred to as CC1, if you remember the story. CC1 stands for co-conspirator number one. But this veil of anonymity has been stripped away. What we do know, this guy, Vikash Yadav, he's 39 years old. He is a former Indian intelligence officer. And now, of course, has been formally charged by the US Department of Justice with murder for hire and money laundering. So those are the official charges. Now, the United States law enforcement allege that he was the mastermind who recruited Gupta to orchestrate this potential assassination of Gurdwara Singh Panoon in New York. Actually, I think mastermind is too strong a word. He is, again, an intermediary. The big question is who was pulling his strings, but Anyway, we'll leave that for another day. But ultimately, he is the next step up this ladder of the chain of command. Now, Gupta, of course, is now facing the music himself in the United States. Yadav himself is still at large. And the story of how he got here and where he is now, this is really, it's a labyrinth of state secrets and street-level crime. So let's look at the man himself. Who actually is Vikash Yadav? According to the unsealed US indictment, Yadav was a senior field officer in the Cabinet Secretariat of the Government of India. And this is the division that houses the Research and Analysis Wing, RAW. That's obviously India's equivalent to the CIA. So this guy isn't nobody. This guy is a very significant character in Indian intelligence. He was a senior field officer in, essentially, the group that contains RAW. And his background is pure paramilitary and intelligence. He served as an assistant commandant in the Central Reserve Police Force, that's the CRPF. He was trained in battlecraft and weapons. US prosecutors alleged that he used this state-sanctioned expertise to coordinate the plot, providing Gupta with things like Panoon's home address in New York, his phone numbers, detailed accounts of his daily movements. So this guy is pure, thoroughbred intelligence operative. And the timeline itself is quite damning because the US said that in May 2023, Yadav recruited Gupta. And Gupta himself was an alleged international narcotics and weapons trafficker. So he recruited Gupta himself to then go out and find a hitman. And Yadav even allegedly arranged a $15,000 cash advance to be delivered to an undercover agent in Manhattan as a down payment on a $100,000 contract. So again, this isn't small money, this. Again, this implies that there are much, much bigger fish in this pool. Because $100,000 isn't sort of low-level crime stuff. This is state-level crime to come up with a payment of $100,000. But this, of course, is where the story takes a little bit of a bizarre turn because the US was building its case. And the Indian government began to distance itself, unsurprisingly, so nothing to do with us. But in October 2024, a spokesperson for the India's Ministry of External Affairs said that Yadav was, quote, no longer an employee of the government. But, and again you have to say, it's unsurprising that the Indian government realised, eek, they're on to us. We better fire Yadav. We need to create a fire break. We need this break of plausible deniability. It was nothing to do with us. To stop the chain of justice breaking through into RAW and discovering that RAW was behind it and then Ajit Deval. So they said, look, he's no longer an employee of us. We don't. It's nothing to do with the government. But it didn't stop there. He wasn't just fired. He was arrested. Not for the Panoon plot. In December 2023, just 3 weeks after his name first surfaced in US court documents, the Delhi Police Special Cell picked him up on charges of kidnapping and extortion. He was accused of abducting a businessman in Delhi and demanding money in the name of the Lawrence Bishnoi gang. You can see how complex this web is. So, in other words, the Indian government and RAW didn't just make him a bit of a scapegoat. They actually went out and totally hung him out to dry. They went and arrested him. He then spent several months in Tihar jail. He was released on bail in April 2024, citing a threat to his life and the need to care for his infant daughter. But since then, he's basically vanished from public eye. He hasn't attended a single court hearing for that kidnapping case that suddenly appeared. And a New Delhi court recently issued a non-bailable warrant for his arrest. So again, you can see how he's been totally hung out to dry by the Indian government and, of course, by Indian intelligence. So this is not an operative who clearly was ordered to launch this operation to assassinate Gurpratap Singh Panoon. But when it got discovered, they've said, oh, it's nothing to do with us. He's basically been cut loose. I mean, talking about disloyalty to one of your agents. If I was an agent in RAW, I'd be quite nervous thinking, clearly if one of my operations that I'd been ordered by Ajit Deval to do, if it goes wrong and the blowback starts coming back on RAW, they're just going to cut me loose and make me a scapegoat. Essentially, I might find myself arrested for undertaking intelligence operations on behalf of India. So again, this poor guy, well, I say poor, he's not poor, but this guy has been absolutely hung out to dry by Indian intelligence. So anyway, but the big question that everyone, of course, is asking is, could Yadav, who's basically just a mid-tier official, could he really have acted alone? Was he really responsible only for this plot? In other words, did he come up with the plot himself without instructions or orders or even oversight from above? I mean, do me a favour. There is no way that a mid-tier officer like Vikash Yadav could come up with, firstly, $100,000 to pay for this. And don't forget, this is just one of many other assassinations of Khalistanis. So if it's $100,000 for Hardeep Singh Nijjar, $100,000 for Avtar Singh Kandar, $100,000 for the guy in Pakistan, one in Italy, suddenly you're potentially talking millions of dollars. So is it realistic that somebody like Vikash Yadav can suddenly find a budget of millions of dollars in his department in RAW, even if he's running on his own, the operation on his own? Do you think budgetary oversight would sign off a budget of millions of dollars for an assassination operation? There's no way. I mean, there's no way he could actually hide the money if he was solely responsible for this plot. In other words, just from a purely corporate budget financial perspective, it is absolutely impossible that Vikash Yadav could have launched this operation on his own. So by implication, it must have had oversight by his own manager. But anyway, that's the sort of slight sidetrack on this. Now, even Panoon himself, unsurprisingly, said that Yadav was just merely a foot soldier acting on orders from much higher up. And Panoon specifically pointed toward the NSA, Ajit Doval, the National Security Advisor, and former RAW chief Samant Goel, suggesting that the plot was part of a much broader state mandate to dismantle the Khalistan movement. This is, of course, the realistic expectation. This is the realistic accusation. Now, the US indictment itself didn't explicitly name Ajit Doval. The implications of a RAW officer operating with such resources and apparent immunity, of course, are hard to ignore. Now, Indian authorities, of course, maintain that these were rogue elements and that state policy does not include extraterritorial killings. I mean, again, as I've just said, there is no way that a budget this size, even in a country the size of India, there is no way that a department within RAW could have a budget that large to cover potentially millions of dollars in just simple payments to hitmen that could go without triggering budget alarms higher up. In other words, there is no way that Vikash Yadav could have spent this sort of money without higher-ups knowing about it. And therefore, by implication, the higher-ups must have signed off on it. They must at least have been aware of it. So, again, the next obvious question, where is Vikash Yadav? Where is he now? Well, the FBI have placed him on their most wanted list. They believe he is still in India. It is quite likely that he is still in India. But the Indian government's silence on his current location is rather deafening. The US is expected to seek his extradition. But, of course, there is a massive hurdle here. There's no record of the US having formally made that request yet. And India rarely extradites its own intelligence officers to face foreign charges. So even if the US managed to identify exactly where Yadav is, and if he is in India, there's no way, even if they launch an extradition request, it is very, very unlikely that the Indian government is going to say, yes, we will extradite him. Speculation, of course, is rife. Is he being protected by his former RAW colleagues? Probably. Is he underground to avoid the reach of the FBI? Or is he being kept in a secure location by the Indian state to prevent him from ever speaking to US investigators? Because, of course, it is likely that if Yadav is captured and arrested by the US state, he's going to do a deal. He's going to do a plea bargain. I'll tell you everything I know as in replacement, in recompense that you don't either execute me or you don't send me to prison for the rest of my life in a US state penitentiary, you know. So it is likely that he will sing like a bird. He will shop Ajit Doval or Samant Goel if he's arrested. And India knows this, so they will be doing everything they can, even though they've hung him out to dry publicly. They've probably got him in a safe house somewhere in Dubai or somewhere hidden in the Indian countryside. But what we do know is on February the 20th, last Friday, there is a scheduled court hearing, or there was a scheduled court hearing in Delhi. No, beg your pardon, I've got my dates wrong. That is tomorrow. There is a scheduled court hearing in Delhi regarding his kidnapping case. So all eyes will, of course, be on that courtroom to see if he does emerge from the shadows, if he does appear in court. Or if he doesn't, that mystery of where Vikash Yadav is will continue to grow. So it's fascinating. And of course, we'll be following the story in great detail. But one wonders, where is Vikash Yadav? Will he appear in court tomorrow? I suspect he probably won't. I think he is being, he's hiding himself, obviously, wants to stay hidden. But I think the Indian state is doing its absolute damnedest to keep him out of the clutches of US law enforcement. Because, as I said, there is no doubt he will sing like a bird in exchange for a reduced sentence, as likely Nikhil Gupta has agreed to as well. So there you go. Interesting stuff. Fascinating stuff, in fact. Okay, let's move over the Atlantic to the UK. And this lady, Preet Kaur Gill, I had the privilege of shaking hands with Preet Kaur Gill. She's a lovely lady, and she's done sterling work on behalf of her constituents. But she's come into a bit of stick, as we call it. She's had a lot of criticism and a bit of backlash on social media. She posted up just a day or two ago, I think it was yesterday, she posted up this tweet, and which basically said, she referred to this terrible event, this hate crime we had recently. We had two, in fact, two rapes that were hate crimes of Sikh women in the Midlands here in the UK. And it is, and particularly one, is definitely being treated as a racially aggravated hate crime. And as she said, it's a horrific reminder that hate is real. But how can we tackle inequality when the system doesn't even recognise who we are? And this does bring up another element, which I'll talk about in a moment. Now, unfortunately, though, there appears to be a bit of a growing rift, and I have referred to this in the past, and this really differentiates British political representatives of the Sikh community to, I have to say, Canadian to some degree, and US representatives of the Sikh community, where our Sikh MPs have come into a bit of criticism and a bit of a rift between the community itself and the MPs who actually claim to represent them. And this week, this tweet from Preet Kaur Gill has sparked a bit of a backlash because it opens up two massive conversations that many in Westminster, that's our parliament, have been trying to avoid for years. Firstly, the official invisibility of Sikhs in British data. That's when she refers to recognising who we are. And secondly, this uncomfortable reality of the grooming gang scandal. And I refer you to many other discussions I've had and many podcasts I've had about this grooming gangs scandal. This is the scandal for our international viewers who might not be aware of it. This is Pakistani, mainly Pakistani or Asian grooming gangs of men, grooming gangs of Asian men, usually Pakistan men or Afghan men, who've deliberately gone about and groomed for sexual assault young Sikh girls and white girls, and indeed girls from all sorts of ethnic minorities, ironically even from their own community. But there are these grooming gangs who groomed young girls, underage girls, for sex. It's absolutely outrageous. And the whole grooming gang scandal has been brushed under the carpet by the British government for reasons that I have gone into in great detail. Keir Starmer himself clearly behind this as well, and he is complicit in this burying of justice. Now, of course, this racially aggravated rape, this attack on this poor Sikh lady in the West Midlands, Preet Kaur Gill made this tweet. It was a powerful statement, but it has triggered quite a significant backlash from those who feel that her recognition only goes one way. First of all, let's look at this recognition problem that she's highlighting. In the UK, the Office for National Statistics, the ONS as it's called, does not include Sikh as a specific ethnic tick box in the census. This is when we collect our population data. So there is no specific box to tick if you are a Sikh, if you're a Muslim, if you're Christian, even if you're a Jedi. I kid you not. Even if you identify as a Jedi, that's a reference to Star Wars, for those who might not be aware of it. A Jedi is a fictional character, a fictional religion in the Star Wars sequence of films. There is a tick box for Jedi, but there is not a tick box if you're a Sikh. So there is no actual census data for British Sikhs, which in itself is a bit of an outrage. And Sikhs are legally recognised as both a religion and an ethnicity under the Equality Act 2010, thanks of course to a landmark case, Mandla versus Dowell-Lee ruling in 1983. Public bodies often ignore the ethnic component in these cases and refer to one of my previous discussions where I highlighted the fact that even now when hate crimes are committed or crimes are committed in the UK, the ethnicity of the perpetrator is being recorded in less and less times. And now, 4 times less cases, or let me put this the other way, 4 times more cases now than just 3 years ago are recorded without the ethnicity of the perpetrator. In other words, they're trying to hide the fact that people from certain ethnic minorities are behind these crimes. Because, again, they're trying to bury the truth. They are afraid of the truth. The British state, the Starmer government, the Labour government are trying to hide the truth because they're afraid of the truth. Anyway, there is no standard Sikh ethnic category used by the police or the Home Office. So hate crimes against Sikhs are often buried under broader labels like Asian. They are Asian hate crimes. Now, in written evidence to Parliament, Preet Kaur Gill herself pointed out that the Home Office does not routinely collect data on racial hate crimes, specifically targeting Sikhs, despite these incidents reportedly outnumbering religiously motivated attacks by 10 to 1. So as a result, what is the result? Well, the system is effectively blind to the specific threats the Sikh community are facing here in the UK. It is making it impossible, therefore, to allocate resources or create policies that then can protect the Sikh community. As I often say, you cannot create the policies to protect a community if they don't know there is a problem. And they don't know there's a problem because they're not actually recording the crimes that they specifically are against the Sikh community. But anyway, the reaction to Preet Kaur Gill's tweet wasn't just about this data. And actually, I'll just scroll down here. This is one of the comments that was directly under Preet's tweet. And yes, hate crime is real against Sikh women. That's why Malvis selectively commands to molest Sikh girls. But still, you and other Sikh MPs vote against an inquiry into the grooming gangs. And this is really, really important. So the comments, like this one, this is the main comment, the one that was, I think, most ticked or approved, liked, whatever you call it. But the comments section was flooded with accusations of hypocrisy. Now, Preet Kaur Gill calls for the system to recognise Sikhs when they're victims of white-on-Sikh crime, but her critics, and this is like groups like the Network of Sikh Organisations and amongst many others, they say that she and her fellow Sikh MPs are failing to recognise Sikhs when the perpetrators come from other minority backgrounds. And of course, we're talking about the grooming gang scandal. Now, for decades, there have been irrefutable reports of Sikh girls being targeted, groomed and abused by gangs, predominantly, as I said, of Pakistani Muslim heritage. Yet, in early 2025, when a national statutory inquiry into these gangs was proposed in Parliament, the majority of Sikh MPs voted against it. And I'm just going to repeat that for those of you who might have missed that. A national inquiry into these grooming gangs was proposed in Parliament last year. The majority of Sikh MPs voted against it. To name and shame them. These are the Sikh MPs who voted against a grooming gangs inquiry. Tamlanjit Singh Desai, a guy who's spoken on many issues. Why would Tam Desai vote against it? Gurinder Singh Josan, Jas Atwal, again, who's done some good work. So these are guys who should know better. Why have they voted against it? Kerith Entwistle, Verinder Jus, Satvir Kaur, Dr. Jivan Sander, Sonia Kumar, Harpreet Uppal, Nadia Witto. Now, Preet herself and Baggy Shankar recorded no vote on the matter, so they basically abstained. So they didn't, even Preet Kaur Gill herself did not support the grooming gangs inquiry. Why? It is a complete and utter betrayal. Now, the NSO, the National Statistics Office, has called this a betrayal. Sorry, the NSO, not the National Statistics Office, National Sikh Organisations, has called this a betrayal of victims and survivors. They've accused these MPs of herd mentality. It's party before their constituents. And they call it a lack of moral clarity for voting along party lines rather than standing up for the very community that they were elected to protect. And Starmer has argued that further inquiries could, he claims, delay actual actions. Rubbish. For many, we know it's another attempt to sweep a specific targeted threat under the carpet to avoid racial tensions. And the irony in this is dripping. Preet Kaur Gill is right. The system doesn't recognise Sikhs, but the community and we are asking, do our own MPs actually recognise this? It's not just the system that doesn't recognise Sikhs, but it seems even our own MPs, Sikh MPs, don't recognise their own constituents. Do they only want the system to see Sikh victims when it's politically convenient, and yet stay silent on the grooming of Sikh girls to maintain party unity? Is it politics first? Is it your party first? Your party is more important to you than actually young Sikh girls, your daughters. It is actually a bit of a defining moment for Sikh political representation here in the UK. The community is protesting. Refer to many of my podcasts. Sikh Youth UK, prime example. I talk regularly to Deepa Singh, who's on the front line of this, trying to raise awareness. Of course, the Sangat, the people in the community, are totally aware of this. There are seminars that are being held on a regular basis to highlight this fact. But our politicians are still trying to bury it. It renders me pretty speechless that people like this, and even Preet Kaur Gill, sadly, who has done such good work, even Preet Kaur Gill, the hand of accusation can be placed on her shoulders, saying, look, you are following party lines above the interests of young Sikh girls who you are claiming to protect. In other words, show some bloody courage. Stand up for our young girls, Sikh girls, white girls, Hindu girls, even Muslim girls are being targeted in these scandals. What are you doing about it? It's an absolute outrage. And at the top of that chain is Keir Starmer, who is complicit in, firstly, the injustice in trying to bury the thing. But he was also, don't forget, the Director of Public Prosecutions presiding over the grooming gangs when it happened at its peak. And he deliberately, it appears, buried the whole concept. He didn't want it to reach justice because he knows he will be implicated in trying to hide it because of inflaming racial tensions. It's an absolute outrage. Anyway, clock's counting down. Gosh, we're running out of time, so I'm going to rush on to my next story. I'm delighted to say that after a large amount of immigration into West Africa of Sikhs, the largest Gurdwara in Accra, in Ghana, has just opened. Let me play, I'll play you a video. I've got a video. Let me play this in the background. This is part of the opening of the Gurdwara. There you go. I'll play that in the background. It is a new Gurdwara. It is the largest in West Africa. And it highlights this long history of Indian migration, and particularly Sikh migration to Ghana that dates back to the early 1900s, when originally it was members of the Sindhi community, apparently, settled in what was then called the Gold Coast. Many of them, unsurprisingly, as they always did, established trading, manufacturing enterprises that then actually evolved, again, the Sikh spirit, evolved into major companies, including names like Melcom, B5 Plus, Letap Pharmaceuticals. Again, these are probably names that are not familiar to most of our audience, but they are big companies in Ghana. They had then, of course, had a huge wave of migrants in the 1960s, including Sikh professionals from the Punjab who took up academic appointments in the University of Ghana. And then in the decades that followed, some transitioned into farming, manufacturing and other industrial ventures, contributing significantly, as of course they always do. Oh, that's not looping, that's a shame. Oh yeah, sorry, that's the end of that. Let me just do that so you're not face the black screen. Of course, typical entrepreneurial Sikh spirit. Wherever they go, they build, create. They cannot help themselves but build these wonderful enterprises. And they then, of course, contributed massively to Ghana's own GDP. And you can see that this Gurdwara looks fantastic, actually. Now, during the civil war in Liberia in the early 1990s, many Sikh families relocated their businesses from Liberia across to Ghana as well. And they, again, contributed massively. And notable companies founded or led by members of the Sikh community included IPMC, Sefi Steel, Ferro Fabric and Premier Steel. And again, it's fantastic to see that even in places like Ghana, as the diaspora has just flourished once again. And it is, the community leaders actually said, they made a statement, they said the inauguration of the Sahib's Gurdwara symbolised not only the growth of the Sikh population in Ghana, but also their enduring commitment to faith, service, peaceful coexistence and national progress. Again, I think it's just a great example of just the Sikh diaspora. Wherever they land, they always make a huge success of it. It's just, it's such a great tribute to the Sikh community and the spirit of Sikhi globally. So I'm rushing now because we're running out of time already again. And I love this story. I came across this story on social media. I thought I'd got to report this one. Here in the UK, this is talking about entrepreneurial spirit. This is a guy called Reuben Singh. He's a man who's been called everything from the British Bill Gates to the Sikh billionaire. And he's recently become a global sensation for his what's called the Rolls Royce Turban Challenge. And he really, again, is just a prime example of Sikh entrepreneurial success and sadly, a material wealth. And his own story, it began in Manchester, that's a city in the north of England. And he was born into a family that embodies actually this legendary Sikh entrepreneurial spirit. His father emigrated from Delhi in the 1970s and built a successful importing company, a company called Sabco, apparently. Now, he, of course, the son followed in the footsteps of his father, and at the age of 17, he was studying for his A-levels, that's our highest sort of exams at school. He launched Miss Attitude. This is a fashion accessories chain. This is a 17-year-old boy. By the time he was 19, he had over 100 stores across the UK. At the age of 19, I was still almost in shorts. I was still playing with toys almost at the age of 19. This young lad at 19 had got 100 stores across the United Kingdom. I was going to take my hat off to him. And he was even recognised by the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's youngest self-made millionaire. What a guy. I mean, what a guy. Anyway, but as I say, he really does represent this spirit of Sikh entrepreneurship. And as part of my research, I came across this word. He's driven by the principle of Kirat Karni, earning an honest living through hard work. And of course, that is one of the prime principles of Sikhi, earning an honest living, Kirat Karni. And again, I just cross-reference this to the spirit of Ghana, and the success of Ghanaians, Sikh Ghanaians. The more visible he became, of course, here in the West, quite often, even as a white guy, the more successful you become for some bizarre cultural reason, it always puts a bit of a target on your back. And particularly, it's very cultural here in the UK. If you become a great success, watch your back because people are always there ready to pull you down. So in 2017, he actually had a racist comment from a white English guy who mocked his turban apparently as a bandage. So, and again, this is a few years old, and I'm sorry, this is a bit of a story, but this just linked beautifully into the Ghanaian Gurdwara story. And so I only just came across this story, and it's worth reminding my audience of just, you accuse a Sikh of something, he isn't going to take it lying down. And I think this is just such a fabulous example of a Sikh response. So he then, after he was mocked about his turban, it was called a bandage or whatever, he bet the man that he could match the colour of his turban to a different Rolls Royce every day for a week. And not just any old Rolls Royce, a Rolls Royce that he owned. And he didn't just win the bet, he turned it actually into a viral celebration of Sikh identity. And he stated, "The turban is my crown and my pride." And as a result, his collection now includes over 15 Rolls Royces, including a jewels collection of phantoms and Kulinans painted to match rubies, sapphires and emeralds. So, again, there you go. Now, I've got a few pictures there, but and there's a lot more backstory to this, which sadly we don't have time to go into. But again, it's just, I think, just symbolic of this guy. He was the victim of a racist statement. He said, right, you know what? I'll show you something. And here he goes. There's just 3 examples of matching a turban to Rolls Royces that he's achieved. And this is sending the message out. And it does actually raise a bit of an argument here, because he did actually raise a lot of money for charity. So fantastic. But there is also an element of, well, there's a little bit of flaunting your wealth, material wealth. And I'm actually interested in the audience's thoughts on this. Is this vulgar? does this actually ironically fly in the face of Sikh principles? Do you think the flaunting of material wealth is actually not part of a Sikh philosophy, Sikh culture? Do you think it's wrong to flaunt your wealth like this? Or do you think his response was justified? Saying, look, and don't forget, he didn't actually raise money for charity in this. I'm a bit on the fence on this. I think, firstly, it is a bit vulgar. I've always been against flaunting wealth. If I was a billionaire, I'd just quietly go away and sort of thank you very much. But there are many people who, when they become very wealthy, drive Lamborghinis, wear big jewellery, wear big gold chains and say, look how wealthy I am. And this well, I won't say this has an element of that, but certainly this is flaunting a bit of wealth. Do you think it's a bit too vulgar, or do you think he had absolutely every right to do this, and it does send a very powerful message to the world? Look how successful Sikhs can be. This is how successful an entrepreneur from the Sikh community can be. And as a vast response to a racist accusation. Anyway, I'll leave that with you and your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on that. But on that note, gosh, we've only got 10 minutes left to rush through our comments. Thank you, as always, to our wonderful audience. Thank you for all your comments. Loads came in. Always very much appreciated. Tajinder Singh starts us off today. And yeah, you appreciated a statement I made by saying, welcoming the architects of repression, the Carney administration has signalled that in this new global world, human rights are simply negotiable. Yeah, thank you for your compliment on that. I think it's absolutely right. And I raise this sadly, that unfortunately, Canada and the UK both stand now side by side guilty of putting economics before human rights. It's disgusting. They are becoming effectively complicit, as you say, Tajinder, in Indian state terror against our Sikh communities. And talking about Sikh communities in the Punjab, Harmal Singh and Suftu Muffins refer to Punjab. A very good information for Punjabi people. Now, Harmal, are you in the Punjab? I really, really hope so. Let me know. Are you in the Punjab? Because what I'm trying to assess how big is our audience in the Punjab, because we really, really need to grow our audience in the Punjab. I know it's difficult. I know you guys face a lot of challenges to view our channel. We, of course, are banned in India. So there are ways you can get VPNs. You can apparently change your settings in YouTube to a different country to bypass those blocks to the channel. But please, please, please do get more people in the Punjab. We do need more Punjabis. As Suftu Muffin says, all Punjabis, why aren't you sharing? Please do share it, because it's so important that more people in the Punjab know the truth, hear the truth, that we are the conduit for the truth. We're trying to educate and inform people in Punjab particularly, but right across India. You are not alone in feeling support for Khalistan. You are not in your own home, even if you're talking about it amongst you, but you're too afraid to speak openly about support for Khalistan or the persecution by Delhi against your community, or the many worries that you probably have on a day-to-day basis. You're not alone. There are millions like you. And I am here, this channel is here to remind you, you are not alone. Do not be afraid. Good things are coming. The Khalistan movement is gaining support, as we've proved on a regular basis. So in other words, but we can only get that message out if people are there to hear it. So please do get others to hear it. Suftu Muffins returns. Yes, thank you for this comment, Suftu Muffins. I looked for this story. I can't find any information about these two guys that you claimed were killed in, was it Bihari or Bihar? I think there's a difference there. But I actually couldn't find any information about that. So please do send me an email. Let me know if you have information about it, because I'd obviously like to pursue it. And I do know there's an awful lot of extrajudicial killings still going on in the Punjab, but it's so hard to get the truth and information out about them, because, of course, the Indian media put a straitjacket around the information. They do everything they can to stop that information coming out of India. So if you're in India and you hear about these things, please email me, send me a message to let me know, give me the information, because it's very hard from outside India to get the truth out, to report to the wider world, and indeed to report to the wider audience in India, who of course are being, that truth is being hidden from them as well. So anyway, so do let me know about that. Thank you. We had Critics Corner yesterday. Nikhil Singh made this comment about us being delusional that India's done for. And I said at the time, well, you might think we're delusional, but a shock is coming your way, mate. And I'm afraid, clearly, you are unaware of a lot that's going on. You are so inured and indoctrinated by the media that you're clearly watching. As Rick Sidhu responded, F you, bot, accusing this person of just basically being a Hindutva bot. But interesting, I've brought this back because Nikhil did actually respond to say, bro, you should be ashamed of yourself. Is this how you were taught to talk? Khalistan is only spread hate, and you are a perfect example. Jai Hind. Well, okay, I think the accusation there of the use of language, yeah, okay, he used a profanity. I don't blame him, sadly. Unfortunately, profanities are sometimes justified. It's clear that Rick Sidhu was justified in that profanity, so I don't think he should feel ashamed of himself. But yeah, we certainly don't endorse bad language from this channel. So on that, I will, almost sit side by side on you. But where, again, we disagree, and the reason you're back in Critics' Corner, Khalistan is only spread hate. No, they really, really don't. They really don't, Nikhil Singh. Who do you think is spreading the hate? Have you actually looked at the Indian government? Do you ever watch this show where we regularly report what the Indian government are doing now and have done for the last several decades? Did the genocides that occurred in the 80s and the 90s bypass you? Do you never read any history? Do you have any idea of what the Sikh community... Now, your name is Singh, you claim. If it really was Singh, if you really are a Sikh, you would be aware of the suffering that your community has endured under the Indian state. If you are a Sikh and you are aware of that and you still ignore it, you are the one who should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed that you are not standing up against, as a Sikh, you are obliged to stand up against this injustice. This is why I don't think you are a Sikh. If I'm wrong, correct me. But if you're a genuine Sikh, you are morally obliged by the Guru Granth Sahib Ji itself to stand up to injustice, to stand up to oppression, which is clearly happening around you if you are indeed in India, in the Punjab. But again, this is why I don't think you are. I think you are a Hindutva bot, as Rick Sidhu says, because sadly, everything that comes out of your comments implies that you are not a genuine Sikh, that you, even the very statement, Jai Hind, I think, speaks volumes. If indeed you are a Sikh, then I think you need to go back to your holy scriptures, with all due respect, and start reading again and reminding yourself why you bear the name Singh. I'm sure my audience has got a few comments on that one, please. I'm only speaking on behalf of an outsider, but I'm sure our Sikh audience might have a few comments on that one. Please let me know. Gil says, Nikhil Gupta is a butcher. I put this up because actually, no, he's not a butcher. And I understand the sentiment, the anger towards Nikhil Gupta. He was trying to hire a hitman to kill a Sikh, a Khalistani. But butcher's too strong. Save your anger for higher up the chain. Nikhil Gupta was just a criminal for hire. He's so low down on the food chain, I wouldn't even waste your breath on him. Waste your breath on people higher up the chain. Not even Vikash Yadav. Let's turn our attention on people like Samant Goel, Ajit Doval, and even Narendra Modi himself. The Brahmins, the Brahmanical elite, those who are behind the anti-Khalistan movement, those who are trying to kill the Khalistan movement, those are the real butchers. The real butchers are the people evading justice after the genocides. They're the real butchers. Nikhil Gupta, don't give him the benefit of credit of a name like Butcher. But I totally understand the sentiment. Mastan Singh Dillai. Yeah, we need to find out who's behind it. That really has been the theme of most of this show. Who is behind it? And then Manjit Kaur, SSK Trucking. God bless America. Thanks, America. Yeah, thank you to the US administration. Satluj TV, thanks the US administration. Thank you for the good work you're doing. Because I have to say, you stand in direct contrast to the British government and now, sadly, the Canadian government, who are doing absolutely everything they can to bury the illegal actions of the Indian state, to bury the abuses of human rights of the Indian state. It is only the US administration, thank you Donald Trump and your administration, who are actually pursuing justice. Because Khan is not pursuing justice for Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The RCMP and CSIS are doing the damnedest to try to do it, but they're coming against a political bloc, as indeed MI5 and 6 are doing here in the UK with Starmer's government. Our law enforcement and intelligence agencies know who's guilty, but they're coming up against this block, this brick wall of politicians who say, no, trade deals are more important than justice and human rights. It's appalling. Manjit Kaur, hello Manjit. You do pop in and have done for a long time. Just to say hello back to you, Manjit Kaur. Thank you for your regular comments. I know you always pop in every now and again just to say a hello and a good morning. So just to say, we do read the comments and I do appreciate them, and just to acknowledge thank you. And a very good morning to you, Manjit, as well. Noah Crazy Magic, a lovely complimentary comment. I do like that. I do love the compliments. Yes, I have a little bit of an ego. It keeps me going. It gets me up in the morning, as I do at 5:30 every morning to do the show. It's hard work. So when I get lovely comments, I do appreciate it. Thank you. So they are appreciated. And Powandeep Grower, good job, sir. I appreciate to you from the Khalsa Panth. Again, appreciate. Well, as I said, it is this appreciation that I feel from you guys that keeps me going. But likewise, as I always do, I like to send it back to you guys. I really appreciate your support. We at Satluj really appreciate your support. We cannot do this show without you guys, without our audience. Obviously, we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you guys. So please do spread the word, get more people watching us. But thank you for your continued loyalty. We do have a fabulous core audience who are here so regularly. Thank you so much for your continued loyalty. It really does mean a lot for us. But also, it means a lot for the Khalistan movement. Don't forget, the more that we keep the momentum going, the quicker Khalistan is going to happen. So it is important that you guys are an essential part of that. It's your comments, your support of this channel that is helping the whole Khalistan movement, even with our own small elements of part of it. But we are part of the Khalistan movement. There are those behind the channel who are a big part of the Khalistan movement. So your support is actually helping push this over the line. We are getting Khalistan, and it's only happening because you guys are there supporting it. But again, it'll happen faster if more people are watching us. So please spread the good word. And of course, the final words, as always, Khalistan Zindabad. Thank you, Malkeet Gadju. Thank you, Gurmeet Singh, as many others of you have done as well. Khalistan Zindabad. That is why we're here. That is why we will continue, God willing, to be here to bring the good message of Khalistan. It's coming. As I say, it's the more of you who help us support it, the faster it's going to come. But it is inevitable. So that's it for another day. And indeed, that's it for another week. And my podcast, do watch my podcast tomorrow with Dr. Grewal. We're going to be talking about the actual legal accusation. Is India a state terror? A terrorist state, beg your pardon. In other words, has India actually met the legal criteria to be accused of being a terrorist state? Fascinating stuff. Do keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching Perspectives. We will see you next week. Watch my podcast, uploaded tomorrow. But otherwise, have a great weekend. Thanks for your loyalty. I'll see you, God willing, on Monday as well.